It's a nice place to live. It's small enough that, there's tons, all of these little shops, right? Local individuals. It really is a great place to live. It's a cute place.
We're in Battleground, a city of about 23,000 people in Southwest Washington. Pamela Martell has lived here for about 9 years. She says her family moved here from Portland because Battleground felt safer and more affordable. She started to notice a lot of the properties were changing hands downtown over the past few years. There was the blue brick convenience store that was renovated into a fancy bakery called Al and Ernie's, the former dairy building that's now an indoor farmer's market, and the nondescript 3-bedroom house that's now Spurgeon's Pipe and Cigar Shop. There are more along Main Street in what's known as Old Town Battleground. And then there's this one.
This is where the complex is going to go, where the business and the church.
She's talking about an empty lot on the east side of Battleground. It's about the size of a football field, and right now it's surrounded by orange plastic fencing. The CEO of Maddox Industrial Transformer has written that his family bought the property a few years ago. Maddox builds and refurbishes electrical transformers. Those are the green metal boxes you might see on a street corner that are used to convert electricity voltage, or the gray metal transformers at electrical substations behind barbed wire fencing. The company employs 125 people in Battleground, and about 3 times that number nationwide. That's according to public testimony their vice president of real estate development gave to the Battleground City Council last August. Maddox is by far the small city's fastest growing company. But this property that's being developed isn't just for their business. The plan for this lot is to build a 25,000 square foot convention center with a 16,000 square foot chapel, a cemetery, and possibly a hotel.
They say that they're trying to develop Battleground and keep the small town feel, which is fantastic if that's really what they're doing. But my bigger question is, if you're bringing in a business building that has a chapel and a convention center, and the convention center has the capacity to hold 1,000 people, and they've stated that in order to get full use out of this convention center, they will need to build a hotel. One, where is this hotel going to go? How are you going to handle the influx of traffic and people? And where are they going to park?
Camden Spiller is the co-owner and CEO of Maddox Industrial Transformer. He and his colleagues have publicly discussed purchasing properties and developing land in Battleground. Using state and county property records, OPB identified more than a dozen corporations controlled by Spiller that have purchased over 30 properties in the community in the past 6 years. That includes the Farmers Market building, the bakery, and the cigar shop. Martell is one resident who's noticed Spiller's employees and the pastor of the church he's involved with talking about some of these investments.
They had started a podcast called The Project Battleground, where they state in the podcast that they are trying to do an experiment in something called Christian localism. And that's what worries me.
The podcast was actually called The Battleground Project, and we'll hear a bit more about that later. Martell was clearly nervous about talking about all of this while walking around town. She kept looking around, trying to see who might be listening or watching. She herself is Christian, but she's not a member of the church Spiller is helping build the new chapel for. It's called First Presbyterian Church of Battleground. It's part of the Presbyterian Church in America. Unlike more progressive Presbyterians, it's an evangelical denomination that's socially conservative when it comes to views on divorce, sexuality, and abortion.
I attend church, but I believe there are many paths to God, and all of them are valid. And I also believe that everybody in every form, of every color, of every sexual orientation, of however you show up in this world is how you were supposed to show up in this world, and there are no wrong ways. And so, yeah, I don't like the idea that someone else comes in with a Christian ideology saying that this is the only Christian way, and if you don't follow our way, then you're out. I don't believe that. And I don't want to live in a place where that becomes forced upon everyone else.
From the Gert Boyle Studio, I'm Jen Chavez, and this is The Evergreen, a podcast from OPB about the place you call home. Some Battleground residents are excited about the revitalization going on in the city, but others have concerns about the intentions of a businessman as he transforms the heart of their Southwest Washington town. The senior pastor of First Presbyterian Church of Battleground has talked about the importance of, quote, governing unbelievers. And both men have ties to a self-described Christian nationalist who has talked about his desire to turn Moscow, Idaho into a Christian town. For some people in Battleground, it's a question of the separation of church and state. Eric Newman is OPB's Southwest Washington bureau chief. He's spent a lot of time focused on what's going on in Battleground. So I'm going to hand the rest of the episode over to him.
Around the beginning of this year, I started hearing from people in Battleground who had questions about LLCs owned by Maddox CEO Camden Spiller that were buying up all these properties in town. I started looking into property records to find out more, and I read through some of the community Facebook pages where people were talking about the properties. And someone sent me the podcast Pamela Martell mentioned.
Hello, welcome to the Battleground Project, an experiment in Christian localism. I'm C.R. Wiley.
C.R. Wiley is the senior pastor at the First Presbyterian Church of Battleground. I hadn't heard that phrase, Christian localism, before, and I was curious. On the show, they interviewed local figures about business and politics in Battleground. I reached out to him and his podcast co-host, Max Booth, who works at Maddox Industrial Transformer. Wiley didn't respond to several emails and calls, and Booth declined multiple requests for an interview. He sent me a short statement via email, but did not respond to a question about Christian localism and the podcast. Shortly after that, all the podcast audio disappeared from the internet. I had one episode loaded onto my phone, and I was able to airdrop it to my computer to record the audio. The episode is from 2023, when another current Maddox employee, Eric Overholzer, was running for city council. Pastor Wiley asked him why he decided to run.
To put it simply, I love the city of Battleground.
Yeah.
And the Lord put it on my heart to serve the citizens of Battleground. And so in that capacity, he called me into politics somehow. I'm not quite sure why yet, but sometimes his plan is greater than ours in all aspects. So I'm just trying to get out of my own way.
On the show, they talked about the need for more crime prevention in the area, as well as growth and the types of housing that should be built. Wiley argued the focus should be on single-family homes.
Here in Battleground, the community has been growing. There are a lot of things about growth that are great. There are other things about growth that are kind of scary and challenging. We've got people moving to the area from all over the place who don't understand kind of the character and history of Battleground and what we have here, what makes it a great place to live in the first place.
On another episode of the podcast that I listened to, Wiley said that he moved to Battleground about 6 years ago. With Overholzer, he talked about the kind of growth that he'd like to see going forward.
There is a sense in which you have to be aware that single people have a different set of priorities than family people.
Single people, he said, aren't as invested in their communities.
And eventually they, hopefully, anyway, settle down and actually become, the kind of community contributors that families generally can be.
Yeah.
So, we have to be, providing housing, obviously, for single people, but we need to prioritize family housing.
Overholzer said he agreed with Wiley's priorities when it comes to housing. At the end of the episode, Wiley endorsed him.
Anyway, well, it's been great to have you, Eric, and all the best. We really hope you win, and we'll put some links in the show notes so that people can find you.
Overholzer did end up winning a seat on the city council. Last year, he started working at Maddox as a production operations manager. And earlier this year, he was elected mayor of Battleground. The mayor declined several requests for an interview, but in a statement said he, quote, takes the responsibility of maintaining transparency and fairness very seriously. I was able to talk with one of his colleagues. Shane Bowman is a Battleground city councilor, and he's lived in the city for more than 20 years. He says religion and politics should stay separate.
It does concern me if we think that we need to involve that in politics. Religion for me is a personal thing, and so I like to keep it that way.
Bowman is a member of the Mormon Church. He says he has no problem with people of faith serving in public office. His biggest concern is what it could mean for one person and the company he leads to have such a dominant presence in a small town.
It can be a little concerning sometimes, and you wonder, like, hey, where are we going with this?
He does see a lot of positives to having a thriving company that wants to invest in the town, but there are some reservations that come with that.
The challenge will be, as you get bigger and bigger and bigger like that, is there a quid pro quo? Is there something that, hey, we did this for the city, this is what we want? I haven't seen it yet, but it doesn't mean it doesn't happen.
Camden Spiller co-founded Maddox Industrial Transformer with his brother 10 years ago. Maddox has grown really fast, with over 400% revenue growth in the past 3 years. That's in part because of the electricity needed for data centers and AI development. Maddox's customers include Amazon, Meta, X, and many other commercial and industrial power users. Spiller explained all that in a 2025 interview at New St. Andrews College. Since Spiller declined an interview with me, I tried to learn more about his perspective through other podcasts he's been on. He was on an episode of the Battleground Project podcast, but unfortunately, I didn't have that one downloaded before the audio was scrubbed from the internet. Spiller was also on the New Founding podcast 2 years ago. New Founding is a venture capital firm and real estate developer. Its members have partnered on a similar project to develop intentional religious communities in Tennessee and Kentucky. Spiller was interviewed on the New Founding podcast in 2024.
I want to spend my life investing in building strong families, churches, and community.
Spiller said on the podcast that Maddox expects to do $1 billion in revenue by 2027, and he has no intention of selling the company. He said he'd like to see Christian business owners think bigger than the typical small mom-and-pop retail shops.
And if we think of business as warfare, and I realize that analogy can be stretched, but we've kind of thought of those little platoons as really the only fighting formation. And I've really wanted to try and encourage believers to have a vision for business that's beyond that scale, and to understand what it means to fight shoulder to shoulder with other believers, or to engage in those battles where you have an alignment of hundreds of Christian households.
This seemed like it was related to what Pastor Wiley was talking about when he said Christian localism. There isn't a great definition for that term, but from everything I could find online on the subject, the best description I have is that it involves promoting Christian values in someone's personal sphere of influence, like politics, work, or recreation. But I still wanted to understand it better. Since Wiley didn't respond to my interview requests, I reached out to Matthew Bodie. He's a professor of English at the University of North Georgia. He writes about religious rhetoric. Bodie wrote about the larger idea of Christian nationalism in his recent book, The Seven Mountains Mandate.
I think what you're describing here is the idea that there should be a kind of a thick Christian culture in a town, no matter what the size, and that the church should be the center, not just a city council type of church, but it should run, and its elders should decide what happens in the government as opposed to just what's happening in their congregation.
Bodie says there are other examples of communities where this seems to be happening. One he gave was in Moscow, Idaho.
Examples are Douglas Wilson's Empire in Idaho. They have a school, they have a seminary, they have a college, they have a church. They don't own the entire town yet, but they're a very big presence in Moscow.
Doug Wilson is the senior pastor at Christ Church in Moscow. And when I reached out, he said he was happy to do an interview.
Coming up after a break, we'll hear what Wilson had to say about Christian nationalism and what he described as the Moscow model. Thanks for listening to The Evergreen, our podcast from OPB about the place you call home. OPB has made a big effort to expand our local journalism in the last few years. We have 2 journalists in Eastern Oregon, 2 in Bend, and of course Eric based in Vancouver. And we just hired another person to report on Southwest Washington along with him. If we're able to raise more money from members, where would you like to see us expand our regional coverage? Let us know. Just send us an email at theevergreen@opb.org. And remember, this episode about Battleground and all the great OPB reporting and storytelling you hear on this show is made possible by the support of many thousands of OPB members. Support our journalism by becoming an OPB sustaining member today at opb.org/pod. And now, back to OPB's Southwest Washington Bureau Chief Eric Newman in Battleground.
I connected with Pastor Doug Wilson from Moscow, Idaho over Zoom in late February. I first asked him to explain a bit about his denomination.
The church I pastor is part of the Communion of Reformed Evangelical Churches, the CREC, which is basically a small Presbyterian denomination. So there's 150 to 170 churches around the world, actually, most of them in North America. And then we have other like-minded people who are friendly, of a similar spirit to us in other denominations, some in the PCA, the Presbyterian Church of America, and so on.
The First Presbyterian Church of Battleground is part of the Presbyterian Church in America, an evangelical, socially conservative denomination. And it's distinct from the larger denomination of Presbyterians. That group is known as the Presbyterian Church USA, which tends to be more progressive. That's all to say that there's a wide spectrum of belief in the Christian faith, and even within Presbyterians themselves. I asked Wilson about his connections to Maddox CEO Camden Spiller and Battleground pastor C.R. Wiley.
I know Camden, and I'm friends with Chris Wiley.
Wilson said he hadn't heard the term Christian localism before. I asked him if he identifies as a Christian nationalist.
So it's a phrase I'm willing to use. I'm willing to say, yeah, I'm a Christian nationalist. I didn't come up with it myself, but I was willing to take it on because it's better than the things I usually get called.
One thing he gets called is controversial. In an interview with the New York Times last year, Wilson said that his long-term vision for a Christian nation would include banning same-sex marriage, further restricting access to abortion, and turning the Ten Commandments into civic law. In that interview, he used a slur to refer to people who are transgender. He also argues that women shouldn't have the right to vote, and he has defended slavery in his past writings. When I spoke with him, he talked a bit about his vision for Moscow, Idaho.
Jesus said in the Great Commission that we're to evangelize, basically, teach the nations, baptizing them. And this is all to be done by means of persuasion, planting churches, starting schools, talking to neighbors. Basically, I would love to see Moscow be a Christian town, and a Christian town being the people there are Christians and have accepted it voluntarily because that's what they want to do.
Wilson said that he was not sure if Spiller and Wiley were inspired by what he described as the Moscow model. But there are a lot of connections between the three men. Wiley's books are published by Wilson's publishing house. Spiller is listed as a director of American Reformer, an evangelical Christian nonprofit where Wiley is on the advisory board. It has a mission to, quote, promote a vigorous Christian approach to the cultural challenges of our day. American Reformer has published authors who argue in favor of Christian nationalism. The organization also hosts a fellowship for young professionals who are interested in politics, which it says is designed to, quote, recapture existing institutions to bring them under the lordship of Christ. Camden Spiller has been on podcasts at New St. Andrews College in Moscow, where Wilson is a founding board member, and his company, Maddox, has an office in Moscow. Despite these ties, neither Camden Spiller nor C.R. Wiley has spoken publicly about their views of Christian nationalism. I asked Pastor Doug Wilson about the concerns that some people have about the connections between businesses and religious institutions in Battleground and Moscow.
To all of that, I'd say it's a free country.
Sure. Yeah, no, totally. It just, to me, sometimes it sort of feels like, well, if it looks like a duck and it sounds like a duck, it's a duck. Like, it seems
well, no,
like
but the duck here, if I could interject here, the duck here is friends hang out with friends, people who know the people that they know.
The growth of businesses operated by members of Christ Church has created tension in Moscow. Some people boycott shops owned by members of the church. While Wilson said he wants Moscow to be a Christian town, he also dismissed the idea that local businesses have a direct connection to his church.
If a businessman in our church opens a restaurant, that's not the Christ Church restaurant. That's not the official restaurant. But people here act as though it is.
Max Booth is the Maddox employee who is also a co-host on the Battleground Project podcast. He said in an emailed statement that he was familiar with Wilson, but the pastor, quote, has no association with Maddox or affiliated companies in Battleground or elsewhere. Around the same time as my interview with Doug Wilson, I came across a link to a sermon that C.R. Wiley gave in Tacoma, Washington. It was from a conference that took place there in 2023. The sermon was titled Building Culture in Hostile Territory, and Wiley talked specifically about Battleground.
I'm going to start with what we're up to in Battleground. So what we're endeavoring to see occur is regime change. And I think that Christians are engaged in that task because we are in the midst of a battle or a conflict of two spiritual kingdoms that are waging war over the same space, the same physical space.
Pastor Wiley didn't shy away from the connections between businesses owned by members of his church and the church's larger mission in the community. He also talked specifically about the effort to create what he described as third spaces, gathering places for people outside of work and home.
There's a new business that our church is involved with helping to get off the ground right now called Alan Ernie's.
Remember, this sermon was from 2023. Alan Ernie's is now open in a building on Main Street in Battleground. It's one of the properties owned by an LLC registered under Camden Spiller's name. Pastor Wiley talked about the plans for Alan Ernie's and how the business would be related to his church.
And it'll be a bakery, coffee shop, kind of your standard, thing. Our church doesn't actually own its own building. We rent space, but this will become the place where we have various events that we're conducting because it'll close every day at 3 o'clock. And in the evenings, it'll be open for Bible studies and different fellowship events that the church sponsors.
Wiley talked about similar plans for a cigar shop in town. It's another property that's owned by LLCs under Spiller's name, according to property records from Clark County and the Washington State Department of Revenue.
The idea is that we want owned space. We want to be the people who have a very strong say, significant say in how things are done and how the business is conducted and so forth.
He also said the church was getting involved in local politics. Wiley himself and Maddox employee Max Booth both ran for city council in Battleground in 2023, but neither made it past the primary election. At the same time, Wiley said his church was promoting other candidates. This was the same year that Eric Overholzer was elected to the Battleground City Council. You may remember from earlier in the episode that Overholzer, who is now the mayor, works at Maddox. During that talk in Tacoma, Wiley went on about why the church should get involved in politics.
What we as Presbyterians and people who belong to the Reformed tradition bring to the larger church are the resources of a public theology that helps us to govern unbelievers.
He talked about the importance of drawing on religious traditions from Lutherans and Roman Catholics that once governed in parts of Europe. He said those models could offer inspiration for how to lead in modern times.
So if we're going to have a mature approach to public governance, we need to think about what it means to be in charge when there are some people who don't agree with us.
I found myself wondering what is really at stake with these kinds of changes in Battleground. I went back to my interview with Matthew Bodie from the University of North Georgia. For one thing, he says that because of the emphasis on the Christian faith, what's at stake with these kinds of movements is religious pluralism. But it's also about who should be in charge of America's cultural and civic institutions.
Whether or not those should be run by Christians, whether or not we should have a Christian media or Christian businesses, or whether or not these businesses should be allowed to sell certain products or promote certain ideas. This is what would be at stake in these type of communities because the church would make those decisions.
It's worth noting that Camden Spiller and his brother recently purchased the local newspaper, The Reflector. The 117-year-old paper is the town's only local news source. Residents' feelings about all the changes in Battleground are mixed. I contacted a dozen Battleground residents, public officials, and business owners in buildings owned by Camden Spiller or near the properties he's acquired. I made calls and introduced myself to others in person. Some, like city manager Chris Swanson, said residents felt good about the changes happening in town.
Alan Ernie's was a rundown building. So they took a building, literally gutted it, improved it, and it's a beautiful bakery and cafe. Behind that building, and I'm not sure if this was like one parcel or not, was the old plastics. They turned it into a beautiful indoor farmer's market and kept the vintage historical look and feel. I think the community, thinks those things are fantastic.
Others had mixed feelings. Several people declined to discuss the recent real estate purchases. 2 business owners said they needed to remain neutral on the subject. 3 other people said they didn't feel comfortable speaking publicly about the changes that were connected to Spiller and Maddox. One of those was a resident who worried that criticizing a billion-dollar company could threaten their small business. Again, here's Pamela Martell, the resident you heard at the very beginning of this episode.
Nobody really wants to talk because it's a small town and it's their businesses, and I get it.
She told me she's concerned about how the big development that Spiller is backing, the one with the convention center and the new church, could change the character of the town. And she's not the only one who's worried about a growing influence over business, politics, and religious life in Battleground.
And I'll be honest, I hope I'm wrong. I 100% hope that I am 100% wrong. Because if I'm wrong, that means that somebody is doing something really great for this town. And I really want that to be the case.
Eric Newman is OPB's Southwest Washington Bureau Chief. You can read his story about Battleground at opb.org or find a link to it in our show notes. Thank you for listening to The Evergreen, a podcast from OPB. Julie Sabatier produced this episode, and our technical director is Stephen Cray. He also engineered the episode. Layla Isbell mixed and mastered the episode. The OPB podcast team also includes Mia Estrada and Sage Van Wing. Eric Newman did most of the interviews you heard. You also heard clips from the Battleground Project podcast, the New Founding podcast, and C.R. Wiley's sermon at the 2023 Equipping the Saints Conference in Tacoma, Washington. The music in this episode is from Audio Network. And if you have a question for us, please reach out. Email us at theevergreen@opb.org. I'm Jen Chavez. Catch you later.